Listen for a second. A winter night talks in tiny noises. The hide door taps its frame. Frost halos the smoke opening. Every breath puffs up, blurs and fades. The fire in the middle? It's not a blaze. It's the size of a calm thought, just enough to do the job and not enough to run away through the roof. Because here's the first lesson. Loud heat is escaping heat. The room stays warm by being clever, not dramatic. Buffalo robes rise and settle when someone turns, the guard hairs catching a soft line of firelight. Outside, the wind keeps its appointment with the open prairie. Inside, it's mild at bed height, a kind of quiet, just right, where you can stick a hand out from the covers and not grumble about it. That calmness isn't an accident. It's design. We've gotten used to thinking winter is one big enemy you fight with more gear and bigger flames. People who slept well in hide lodges and mat houses didn't think that way. They solved winter with a pile of small, specific choices. The first choice is not fabric, fuel, or some secret hack. It's where you put the tent. Cold acts like a traveler. At night, it slides downhill and pools in low spots like water, so you don't camp in the bowl. You look for the shoulder of a slope, a bench just above a frozen creek, close enough to fetch water, high enough to keep the cold river from camping with you. You face the door east if tradition says so, or angle it into the lee when the wind demands respect. A line of willows or cottonwoods gets the sailor's eye treatment. A good windbreak is your friend. A snag leaning the wrong way can be a widowmaker. You kick the snow. If it squeaks sharp, the air is cold and dry. If it thuds, the air's milder. You ask the ground for news. Out here, the favoured shelter is that familiar cone strangers misheard as tipi, and spelled however they pleased. It's a cone for reasons, not for looks. Fast to pitch, sturdy in gusts that flatten boxy walls, and simple enough that skilled hands can raise it without the sky changing its mind. 3 or 4 long poles lash into a tripod. The rest lean into a ring, each rib sharing the load. One lifting pole carries the hide cover up and around. The seam closes. 2 more poles hold the smoke flaps like small wings you can steer. If you have to, you can throw it up fast. If you're teaching, you build it like bread hands working. Voices correcting, no panic, lots of memory. Hide sounds too casual for the labor behind it. Buffalo skins are scraped, stretched, and tanned until they're tough and flexible. One robe is a blanket. Many robes become weatherproof wall. Sewn by hand, small pieces flex together. A single giant sheet would freeze, crack, and sulk. When fog coats the cover with ice, it flexes and recovers. When wet snow piles up, the cone sheds it in little slides. The first time you hear that thump, you jump. The second time, you smirk. Deep winter wants a heavy cover. Good heft is warmth. But the real magic lives inside. A second wall called the liner. It hangs from the poles around the lower half of the room, sometimes higher, made of hide, canvas, or tightly woven mats, depending on what the land and trade allow. That liner creates a narrow hidden hallway between itself and the outer wall. Cold air seeps in low, warms as it climbs that gap, then pulls smoke upward and out. Inside the liner, the air at bed height holds steady and kind. Put your hand near the floor and you'll feel a shallow, cold layer a few hand widths thick. Slide your hand up and you'll hit the sleep band. Higher still is the smoke's path. None of this is guesswork. It's a controlled draft. The whole tent is a quiet chimney that hates drama. Beds live under the curve of the wall, leaving that modest fire at center stage. Some families use raised frames a hand or 2 off the ground for spring and air. Others lay down thick bedrolls over a deep cushion of plants. Spruce boughs for spring and scent. Sage or willow when spruce is a rumor. Cattail and tulle mats stacked like pages. On top goes a fur robe. Hair up to trap still air. Then more robes. Then maybe a woven blanket if trade has reached your door. 2 buffalo robes, fur to fur, make a pocket that laughs at the hour before dawn. Rabbit skin blankets, cut into spirals and stitched into a pelt made of corkscrews, are light and improbably warm. Smoked deer hide, softer, less likely to freeze into a board. Each small lesson is a single stitch. The quilt is comfort. Keep the fire modest. Hardwoods are rare on the grass sea. Cottonwood burns quick and eager. On the open plains, dried buffalo chips burn steady and even, and they don't throw sparks up the smoke hole like a tantrum. fuel that grazed here in summer warms you in winter without the drama. If you grew up with the smell, you don't wrinkle your nose. Plus, the liner and the flaps keep smoke from hanging around like an uninvited cousin. The wind shifts, the flaps answer 2 fingers on a cord, a small nudge, problem gone. It's not a chore, it's a conversation. Clothing at night is strategy, not bravery. A soft cap traps heat your head would otherwise donate to the ceiling. Mitts you can shrug off quickly are perfect for tending coals. Footwear stays dry and a little loose. In harsh cold, you tuck in fine grass, a tiny insulation layer that spreads pressure and drinks up stray sweat before it turns to ice. Tight at night is a mistake. It strangles blood and turns toes into protesters. Think in layers. An outer shell breaks wind. The next layer holds air. The last one stays dry. Your body isn't a furnace that wants heroics. It's a sensible house that prefers good walls and quiet habits. Don't underestimate the door. It's more important than it looks. The cover hangs on a frame, pegged or weighted so it drops shut on its own. Daytime? Prop it open and move freely. Night? Keep it crisp. A sloppy door lets a cold tongue lick the floor and climb. The floor itself is hard-packed earth, swept with a willow broom. In deep cold you might catch a lace of frost by the door, it's gone by sunup. A shallow trench around the fire keeps embers where they belong. Heat stones by the coals, wrap them, and bring them into the bed for your feet if you're in stone country. No suitable stones? No one complains. You adapt to the land. The land won't adapt to you. When storms show up, the cone does what it was built to do. Wind leans and slides off. Gusts shake it and find nothing to grab. The poles share the load. Stakes matter most in these hours. Drive long wooden pegs at an angle so they bite frozen ground. In deep snow, cut a trench and bury the cover's skirt so the lodge becomes part of the landscape. A painter may prefer the clean line of a freestanding cone. The sleeper prefers the quiet of a buried edge. Snow in the open is insult. Snow packed around your wall is ally. People who live with winter get used to these polite contradictions. Cold weather also has a sense of humor. Somebody swears they'll keep the fire all night, but coal's a hypnotic next thing. The tent is a tidy ash bed and someone clears their throat from across the room. Another person declares the smoke flaps perfect, only to have the wind disagree. A dog finds the warmest spot by the liner and gives you a look like, you're welcome to join if you bring snacks. No one takes offense. Cold teaches cooperation with sharp tongues and useful hands. Some nights are crystal, the stars so bright your brain hears them crackle. Others are muffled snow falling thick until the world shrinks into a polite little box. In long stretches of weather, the camp becomes a village of routines. Repair tools, straighten arrows. Tell stories that don't try to conjure fear. Winter makes enough of that on its own. The past is told the way a tracker reads prints carefully, in order, without turning it into a horror show. The structure keeps minds easy, even when wind practices every note it knows. And remember, this cone isn't the only answer. In the woods, people bend saplings into domes and cover them with woven mats, birch bark and hides. The smell is green and clean. Beds are platforms with storage below to keep gear dry. Fires are smaller because the space is smaller, and the smoke hole gets a lid of bark or hide you tweak by hand. If you've ever woken in a modern tent to your own breath raining back on you, you've met the same physics just without the elegant fix of a liner gap and tuned vents. On riverlands and marsh, cattail and tulle mats are woven tight enough to shed rain and slow wind. Hung like shingles, they look delicate but act like a wall. In hard frost they stiffen and hum when the wind tests them. Inside, they warm easily and swap out to dry. A quiet luxury you appreciate the first time you don't crawl into damp bedding. None of this works without skills that modern people often call arts, as if they were hobbies. Tanning hides so they stay soft after wet-dry cycles is hard, exact work. Do it badly, and your door slaps like a scold. Do it well, and the cover falls into place and mind its job. Weaving mats that hold their edge all winter starts with choosing the right stand of reeds. Not every plant becomes a wall you can trust. If you worry about air in a house with a fire, good you should. The answer here is deliberate ventilation. Even in severe cold, small leaks at the door and a slender lift at the cover's base feed that hidden hallway between liner and skin. The smoke flaps set the draft like careful hands on a valve. A small, clean-burning fire sends up a thin, direct column that goes out instead of swirling in your face. Don't try to seal everything and hoard every warm molecule. That hoards moisture too, and pays you back with frost in your blankets. Better to run a steady, breathable flow that puts comfort exactly where people lie down. Water matters. Melt snow in the pot and keep it near heat, so it doesn't turn into an ice sculpture you'll fight with at dawn. Lay a stick across the rim to prevent boilovers that snuff coals and earn commentary you didn't ask for. Leave the pot at the edge overnight in hard cold, so morning starts with cooperation, not chisels. It's easy to imagine winter as something that happens outside the tent, while comfort happens inside. In reality, the day writes the night. Move camp at a steady pace and take real rests so sweat doesn't become your 2 a.m. enemy. Dry clothes whenever the sun offers a deal. Check snowshoe thongs before dark. Collect enough fuel to remove the possibility of embarrassment, not enough to audition for Lumberjack of the Year. When a child falls asleep early against a rolled robe, the talk drifts around them without fuss. A small economy of courtesies warms a room as well as any fire and costs less fuel. That's the pattern. Calm physics, competent people, and a modest flame. It isn't a spectacle. It's a system. And it works. Start with the land. Winter rewards people who read it like a letter written in snow. Cold flows downhill at night. It pools in creek bottoms and swales the way water does. So you take the bench above the creek, not the creek's pocket. You choose a shoulder of hill that lets the wind pass without shaking hands with your bed. You scan willows and cottonwoods for a pattern. Trees leaning just so mark a line where wind has argued for years. You let those hints decide where the door faces east if custom calls for morning sun, lee if prudence insists on quiet. Then you talk to the snow. Heel down, heel up, does it squeak like chalk, dry and fierce, or thud like felt milder and forgiving? The answer decides how high you pitch the cover, how tight you pull lines, whether you bury the skirt in a shallow trench to marry wall to ground. Drive long stakes at a slant so frozen soil grips them like a promise. If you've got snow deep enough, carve a low wind wall on the windward side. It looks small, but it steals bite from gusts with the kind of efficiency that doesn't brag. The cone goes up quick when hands remember. 3 or 4 poles lash into a tripod, the rest lean into a circle, each rib sharing load with its neighbours. The lifting pole swings the hide high and around. The seam closes where it knows to close. Smoke flaps tie out like small wings. Aim them and you've aimed the engine. If weather presses, you can do this near wordlessly. If you're teaching, you let the pace be human. Someone corrects cord length, someone shifts a stake, and a newcomer's hands figure out what just tight enough feels like. Hide is the original smart fabric. It bends without sulking, stiffens without quitting, thaws without cracking if tanned right. Many smaller panels, stitched with brain-tanned patience, behave better in cold than one proud sheet. A rim of rime might edge the cover by dawn, but the fabric flexes and returns. Wet snow tests the angle, then slides in soft avalanches that thump and vanish. No celebration, no complaint, just physics agreeing with craft. Inside, the liner transforms a tent into a house. Hang it shoulder high or a bit more. Leave a hand space along the floor so air can slip in. That gap between liner and skin is a secret hallway where cold air turns honest. It rises as it warms, escorts smoke upward, and leaves moisture at the top rather than on your blankets. Put your palm near the floor, you'll feel a thin, cold layer. Lift to knee mild. Lift to shoulder warmer still, then thinner toward the lid where the smoke river runs. You can literally feel the system working, no lecture required. The center fire is modest on purpose. Not a speech, not a spectacle. A steady worker inside a ring of stones that holds shape without sucking away heat. Cottonwood burns fast and bright. Feed it short. Chips from grazing animals burn slow and even. Leave little ash, and don't spit sparks toward your roof, a prairie solution wearing prairie logic. In the woods, split straight-grain pieces that don't go pop at the wrong time. And always, always size the flame to the room, not to your opinions. Bedding solves ground first, then air. Start with spring. Spruce boughs where spruce grows, willow or reeds where it doesn't. That cushion traps still air and keeps ribs from writing letters to the floor. Lay mats to flatten the small lumps. then hides. Hair up to trap air, hair down to make a tougher shell if sparks are a worry. Two buffalo robes, fur to fur, build a pocket that keeps its scents when dawn is testing everyone else's. Caribou lofts high for its weight because each hair is a hollow tube. Thousands of tiny rooms that refuse to give up heat quickly. Deer is honest and everywhere. Rabbit skin blankets, spiraled and stitched, are light, warm, and better than their reputation by a mile. A traded wool blanket rides the top as spark guard and weight, a practical friendship between worlds. Clothes for sleeping serve circulation, not fashion. A soft cap keeps the heat you paid for with supper. A scarf sits easy at the neck so breath doesn't condense on fabric and come back as a cold kiss. Mitts you can shrug off without wrestling are worth more than brave fingers that wake up swearing. Footwear is dry, a touch loose, and on mean nights stuffed with fine grass that spreads pressure, holds still air, and sips up stray sweat before it becomes a frozen opinion. The rule is layer for function. Outside breaks wind, middle holds air, inside stays dry. The door is the smallest big deal in the room. Fast, tight, reliable. It should fall shut by itself because people forget at 3 a.m. A sloppy door invites a river of cold to crawl along the floor and climb the wall. And now your fire's job just doubled. Coming in, brush snow where snow belongs. Lift and let it fall clean motion. No drama. You don't yell about doors here. You behave them into doing their job. Set the daily rhythm so the night doesn't punish you. Move at a pace that doesn't flood your clothes with sweat. Dry what got wet while daylight has patience. Thongs and ties get checked before dark, not after. Bring in enough fuel to keep embarrassment out of the evening. Leave the heroics to stories. When a child nods off against a rolled robe, voices fold around that small shape and the night keeps its manners. Storms are where the house shows its character. Wind leans, the cone sheds. The poles bend and share. Lines tighten and sing. Someone steps out with a long brush pole and tickles weight off the leeward side, so seams don't learn bad habits. Back inside, a hand moves 2 finger widths on a flap cord, smoke narrows, eyes stop watering, conversation resumes at a lower volume because the room requested it. You don't crank the flame, you tune the air. Food is architecture. Fat and broth lay slow, helpful wires through the night. A handful of parched corn or a slice of dried meat at intermission between first sleep and second turns a shiver into a shrug, without demanding a full cook. Tea of spruce, willow, or mint wakes the mouth and smooths the throat. Water lives by the fire's edge, so it remains water. Anything else is a morning chore disguised as ice art. A stick across the pot prevents sudden enthusiasm that flips a lid and drowns coals. Little fixes, big outcomes. Dogs are unlicensed inspectors. One sleeps by the door and translates drafts into sighs. Another claims the liner's warm stripe where the air is best and pretends it's a public service. A third sticks with the person who needs heat more and acts like that was the plan all along. No training montage, just a long contract between species that renews itself at breakfast. Village layout matters. A crescent of lodges facing a common space creates a calm interior weather that gusts respect. Horses staked at the right distance break wind without becoming hazards. Trails to woodpiles and water share a logic that saves everyone nighttime explanations. A sweat bath set a little apart delivers clean muscles and a fast slide into deep sleep. A rack at the right arc of the fire dries mittens and meat without inventing sparks. None of this is grand, all of it is rest. Shelter changes with region, principles don't. In dense woods, frames of bent saplings wear mats and bark like overlapping shields. Smoke exits through a lid you can nudge with a stick. Beds are platforms dry below, warm above. On coasts where winter is wet more than brutal, ventilation fights damp first, cold second. Mats lift, gear hangs, trenches catch drips. The fire's job is drying as much as heating, so you feed it little and often for a steady line of warmth that doesn't steam your home. In the far north, caribou skin tents glow from oil lamps that heat as much by light as by flame. Entries are low tunnels that stop wind from striking beds in the face. Everywhere, the same simple plot. Insulate under, vent over, keep heat modest and obedient. Trade brings canvas and stoves. Canvas travels light, mends easy, sheds rain when treated. On its own, it bleeds drafts and collects dew. Give it a liner, and it behaves like it grew up here. Invite a small iron stove and you get fast, dry gear, steady local heat, and a pipe that needs a proper collar so the roof doesn't learn fire the wrong way. Old rules don't retire. They adopt new cousins. Vent stays deliberate. Door stays quick. Fire stays size to the job, not to ego. Maintenance is constant and calm. Pegs at a slight angle hold better in frozen ground. If one starts a side hustle called wiggle, replace it before the wind writes an essay. Sinew swells and shrinks with weather. A short section gets swapped before it becomes a long story. Lacing pins get rubbed smooth so they don't chew the seam. The broom's soft flick keeps the floor from becoming a midnight dictionary of words you wish you hadn't stepped on. Humor keeps edges from getting sharp. Someone once sealed the door so tight, the house collected everyone's breath. By morning, the bedding wore a pretty frost, and the lesson stuck harder than any lecture. Someone else hung mittens over flame, not in its breath. The mittens changed shape and the owner changed habits. These are the kinds of jokes that winter appreciates. By the time the room settles, fire ticking, liner breathing, door tapping its small, "I'm here," you feel the difference between a fight and an agreement. The air at knee height holds kind. The smoke goes where it should. The bed remembers how to trap stillness. Sleep arrives like a worker coming on shift, not a hero crashing through a wall. And when you wake at the small hour to add a stick, the house answers with cooperation. A thin column, a quiet draft, the soft sound of a robe settling back into warm. That's not luck. That's design behaving like good manners. Let's start at the center. The fire isn't a performance. It's your most reliable co-worker. Keep it modest. Stones ring it not to show off, but to keep the shape steady and stop coals from straying. Short pieces of wood make for better control, quick response, fewer surprises. In grass country, dried chips from last summer's grazers are the unsung MVP. They burn evenly, don't shower the roof with sparks, and leave a tidy bed of coals that feels like someone held the door for you all night. In timbered valleys, split straight grain that behaves birch for easy lighting, cottonwood for fast warmth you feed in measured bites, alder and willow when you've planned ahead and seasoned right. The rule of thumb never changes. Size the flame to the room, not to your mood. Tuning air is the other half of the job. The liner isn't decoration, it's your HVAC, disguised as tradition. Hang it with a hand's gap along the floor so the cool stuff can slip in and start the climb in that hidden hallway between liner and outer skin. Tie it high enough that beds sit in the kind layer, where breath feels easy and eyes don't sting. Above that, warmth thins into the smoke channel. Set the flaps to aim that narrow column where the sky actually wants it. Too open, and you drag comfort out with the smoke. Too tight, and the room collects a sulky haze that makes throats complain. 2 fingers on the cord. Is often the difference adjusted by inches, not speeches. Now the bed. Ground first, then loft, then shell. Give the earth a job so it stops stealing heat. Lay springy boughs if you have them, or a deep mat of reeds when boughs are a rumour. That cushion traps still air and forgives pressure points. On top, a flattening mat. Then hide with hair up to hold micro pockets of warmth. Add a second hide with hair facing in if you want to create a warm capsule that laughs at the coldest hour before dawn. Buffalo makes a heavy, calm pocket. Caribou is lighter but loftier every hair, a hollow tube, thousands of tiny thermoses. Deer does steady work wherever those others are, stories. A rabbit skin spiral blanket is featherweight charm that punches above its class. And a wool trade blanket on top is a spark shield and a civilizing weight. The whole stack isn't a mountain, it's a sequence. Get the order right, and you stop fighting cold and start ignoring it. Sleep clothes are simple technology. A soft cap or hood keeps the head from being a chimney. A loose scarf guards the throat without trapping damp. Mitts you can shrug off in the dark are better than brave bare fingers. Footwear is dry, slightly loose, and on harsh nights, lined with fine grass that spreads pressure, creates still air, and sips up moisture. If boots froze a little, hand warmth persuades, not force. Keep the things that met snow hanging where mild heat and honest air can do the slow work of ready by morning. The door deserves respect. A good door closes by itself. Weight it, peg it, train it. Every time you step out, lift clean, step through, let it fall. Brush snow where snow belongs. A sloppy door lets a ribbon of cold snake in at floor height and climb straight into beds. Run doors like you run clocks. Reliably and without drama. Night has a rhythm in good houses. Often it's two sleeps with a quiet intermission. Someone stirs, feeds coals, nudges a pot a thumb width toward the warm place, and checks the flaps with two careful tugs. No announcements. The room answers with cooperation. Thin smoke stream, mild air at knee height. A soft tap from the door when it seals. If wind shifted, one person goes out with a long pole, brushes weight off the leeward side so seams don't develop opinions, and plants a peg deeper. Another inside adjusts the flap angle by a degree that looks like nothing and feels like relief. You don't win against weather. You duet with it. Food is part of the architecture. A stew with fat rides long into the small hours. Grains cooked well, roots softened until they stop arguing. These keep the body burning evenly. Midnight snack? Parched corn or a strip of dried meat is more efficient than staging a kitchen comeback. Spruce or willow tea clears the throat. Mint settles a talkative stomach. Keep water at the fire's edge so it stays liquid and useful. A stick across the pot lid prevents drama. If your kettle has a metal handle, give it a cloth collar. That small mercy prevents vocabulary lessons in the dark. Dogs are thermal consultants with paws. The one with the strong sense of duty parks by the door and changes position when the draft writes a different sentence. The cozy strategist claims the best stripe by the liner. Another chooses a bed to guard, pretending it liked that person best anyway. You don't train this. You just thank them in the morning the old-fashioned way with food. Village layout is part weatherproofing, part courtesy. A shallow crescent of lodges around a shared space breaks gusts. Horses staked at the right distance become living wind fences without endangering roofs. One path to wood or chips, and one path to water saves nighttime explanations. A sweat lodge, a little apart, means clean, loose muscles slide into sleep like sled runners into a groove. A drying rack at the correct arc from the fire turns wet mittens into tomorrow's allies without inventing new holes. Shelter styles change by region. The physics stays. In dense woods, a dome of bent saplings wears cattail mats and birch bark like shingles, each overlap telling rain it has other plans. Smoke leaves through a bark lid you can nudge with a stick. Beds ride on platforms dry underneath, warm at sleep level. On wet coasts, everything lifts. Beds, gear, hopes. Vent generously to kick damp out. Feed small fuels little and often for a drying heat that doesn't steam the walls. Far north, caribou skin tents glow with oil lamps broad, even warmth with almost no smoke. Entries are low tunnels, not doors, so the room doesn't exchange its best air every time someone wants a look at the sky. Trade editions show up and learn local manners. Canvas is light, strong, and quick to mend. Treat it, and it sheds rain. On its own, it invites drafts and dew. With a liner, it grows a brain. Small iron stoves dry gear fast and purr at a steady temperature. Give the pipe a proper collar where it meets the roof, or it will teach you a lesson you didn't need. Even with a stove, the rule holds. Small, steady heat you can tune beats loud heat that leaves. Maintenance is a quiet sport you play every evening. Sinew swells and shrinks replace short lengths before they write a bigger story. Lacing pins get rubbed smooth so they slide in and out without chewing the seam. Stakes driven at a slant hold better in frost. If one starts to wiggle, stop pretending and fix it. A quick sweep with a willow broom makes the floor behave and saves bare feet from discovering something pointy at midnight. Move the pot an inch, then another inch. Simmer is a place, not a theory. Storm practice is choreography, not combat. If wet snow builds, brush from the leeward side so you don't drag seams the wrong way. In deep cold, bury the cover's skirt in a trench of packed snow. It turns your wall into part of the landscape and quiets low drafts. Cut a small wind wall on the windward side. It's not tall, but it's persuasive. Pegs check in at bad hours, expect it. Answer with an extra stake where the ground will take it. Inside, keep voices low. The fire stays disciplined. The liner does the subtle work. Everyone sleeps because the room is doing its job without applause. Teaching happens by doing. Kids learn where the safe line is around the fire by being given jobs. Feel the draft at floor height, report honestly. Hang mittens at one hand from the smoke, 2 hands from the flame. Practice the door lift that lets the room keep its shape. Elders sleep where drafts are least because that's respect and smart logistics. Hunters who leave early take the path that doesn't climb over other people's plans. Guests wake to warm boots because that's what welcome means in winter. Reading the signs keeps you from making speeches later. A sharp squeak underfoot means dry, biting cold, pitch tight, shrink air leaks, feed fuel often but small. A soft thud says gentler weather still seal the door but breathe easier. A crisp white crown around the smoke opening at dawn means moisture left the way it should. Dry bedding at the collar means the liner height is correct. Mild air at knee height means the flaps are tuned. If any of these fail, the room will write you a polite essay in frost. Read it once, fix the cause, and get on with resting. In the end, what looks like coziness on camera is competence off camera. A small flame that thinks before it acts. A wall that teaches air where to walk. A bed that holds stillness. A door that minds its job. And hands that make small adjustments instead of big speeches. That's how a winter house pays you back with quiet hours that feel ordinary because everything is correct. Before tools, before fuel, before the first cord is tied, you win or lose the night with where you put the house. Cold is not just a number, it's a traveller. It pours downhill after sunset and pools in hollows the way fog collects on a river bend. If you camp in the bottom of a bowl, you'll sleep in a puddle of night air that never learned manners. So you aim for the shoulder, not the floor. A shallow bench above a frozen creek is perfect. Water keeps moving under ice. The flow helps sweep cold past. And your sleeping height sits above the worst of it. Walk the site like a tracker. Kick the snow. A sharp squeak means dry, keen cold and wind that will have opinions. A soft thud suggests moisture in the air and a gentler night, with the caveat that heavy snow can load the roof if you pick the wrong angle. Reed grass and willow. Lean lines tell you how the valley usually breathes. If a stand of cottonwoods grew with a slight bow, they are pointing at the prevailing push. You can use that memory to set your door and your smoke flaps so the room breathes out without blowing heat away. Trees are coastline to a sailor. A good line filters wind. A bad one breaks and sends teeth toward your roof. Stand back and squint. You're looking for even crowns and trunks that did not grow brittle from imbalance. If branches have a habit of dropping, set up beyond their opinions. If trunks show a long, smooth lean, that is a wind corridor. Tuck behind the shoulder, not in the throat of it. On open ground, a quick snow wall 2 shovels high on the windward side can change your night from argumentative to polite. It is not a fortress. It is a sentence that tells the gusts to pick on someone else. Ground underfoot should do a job. Packed snow makes a level, insulating floor if you're above the cold pool. On bare earth, knock out hummocks and sweep toward clean. Lay mats or boughs deep at bed lanes. Put a shallow trench around the fire ring to keep runoff from melted snow from turning the floor into a surprise. If the soil is stone hard, drive long stakes at a slant and back them with snow blocks or dead men anchors. Pegs are not decorative. They carry the night. Door logic matters at the site scale too. If custom says east and the wind says no, obey the wind. You can open to sun in the morning if the sky is kind, but at midnight you want a door that falls true and faces away from the insult. A door that lifts into the wind is a flag asking for trouble. A door that lifts into calm acts like a valve. Pick the valve. Layout for groups is weathercraft in disguise. A crescent of lodges that face a shared court turns a gust into a slow curve. Horses staked at the right arc, not pressed against the houses, become living snow fences. Leave clear paths to water and fuel that do not cross the main conversation. In real cold, a sweat lodge set a little off the wind path is not indulgence. It resets bodies, so sleep arrives fast and stays sensible. Drying racks belong at the thoughtful distance where smoke can visit without turning mittens into lace. Now for snow itself. It is both adversary and employee. Packed at the skirt, it seals drafts. Stacked as a short wall, it breaks the wind's favourite reach. Cut and laid as blocks, it can build a silent partner that holds temperature like a promise. Even if you never intend an entire snow house, you can borrow that technology. Bank the base, lip the door, carve a sump by the threshold, so shavings and meltwater settle where feet are not. In a storm, brush weight off the leeward side with a long pole so you do not drag seams. Do it lightly, often, and from the right angle. Drama breaks covers, discipline keeps them. Smoke is a road you pave with placement. Look up. Are you under a rotor zone where wind curls back on itself and throws your smoke downward? You can see it by the way snow swirls on drifts and by the whip of a scarf held up for a count of 5. If the air tumbles there, move. Set where the wind runs clean overhead. Your flaps become steering, not rescue. If you are in woods, make sure the attic above the smoke opening has real sky. A narrow canopy funnels smoke into arguments. A small gap to the stars creates a tidy chimney. Moisture is the quiet enemy you manage with inches, not slogans. Pick ground that drains by itself. Slight tilt from door to fire helps the room dry during the day, especially when boots track in their opinion of the weather. A hand's gap under the liner invites the cold layer into the hidden hallway where it can warm, rise, and leave with your breath's water. Hang the liner high enough that beds live in the gentle band. If you wake to a frost rim around collars, lower or loosen the liner so the room can exhale. If eyes sting, open a finger's width at the top and take a finger's width at the base. The air will tell you when you've got it right by becoming ordinary. Fuel planning starts at the map, not the fire. On plains, collect dry, flat chips before dark and keep them under a cover near the door so frost does not try to join your combustion. In timber, split and stage short pieces and learn each wood's voice. Cottonwood flashes and sulks. Birch lights and forgives. Alder and willow prefer a steady cadence. On wet coasts, think in small, frequent feeding to dry gear without steaming the room. If oil lamps are part of your world, site the tent to shelter the flame from tantrum winds and give the wick the calm it needs to burn clean. Etiquette is infrastructure. A quiet camp sleeps better because people move like they understand doors. Brush shoulders at the threshold. Drop the flap with purpose. Keep voices at the level where the fire can still be heard breathing. Set tools where bare feet will not meet points. Keep water on a low shelf so it greets morning as water, not sculpture. None of this is fancy. All of it is the difference between rested and tired but survived. Regional shapes follow the same grammar. In forests, a bent sapling dome with mats and bark wants a spot where shed snow can slide and land with a harmless thump. Put beds on platforms to live above the low cold layer. In open grass, a hide cone needs room for flaps to aim true and for wind to run past without catching. In wet country, lift everything and vent generously. At sea edges and in the far north, entries are tunnels more than doors because controlling the exchange is the whole point. The shapes are cousins. The physics is the same. Checklists help, but read them with your hands. Is the site above the cold pool? Yes or move. Do trees shelter without threatening? Yes or shift. Is there clean sky above the smoke route? Yes or adjust. Can you seal the skirt and still breathe? Yes or fix the liner. Is fuel staged for a small, steady fire? Yes or gather. Is the door trained? Yes or teach it. If you want a field trick for wind you can use in a hurry, try the scarf test. Stand at likely ground, hold a scarf or strip of cloth at shoulder height, and count. A steady pull that does not whip means good flow. A snap and fall means turbulence. The former is chimney weather. The latter is smoke in your eyes weather. Now step 10 paces, retest, and feel how microclimates change on the scale of a tent length. That is the difference between a decent night and a lecture from the air. Finally, accept the truth that comfort is not a grand gesture. It is sight first, wall second, flame third, door always. Place the house where cold is a passerby, not a tenant. Teach air to walk the route you want. Set a fire that works and stays. Run the door like it belongs to a house with standards. Do that, and the rest of the night turns from an argument into background music. You roll, tuck the robe at your shoulder, hear the soft tap of the flap settling, and fall asleep in a room that feels like it knows you. That is not luck. That is placement. If the fire is the heart, the liner and smoke flaps are the lungs, and lungs beat muscle every time in a long winter. We tend to obsess over the flame because it's pretty, but comfort is mostly airflow you barely notice. Get the air right, and a small fire feels like a luxury. Get it wrong, and a bonfire turns into a smoky tantrum that wastes heat and attention. This is the part most people skip. Don't. Start with the liner. Hang it from the interior poles, so it circles the room like a second skin. The lower edge should sit a hand's breadth above the floor, enough space for cold, dense air to slip in and join that hidden hallway between liner and outer cover. That hallway is your quiet chimney. As the incoming air warms, it climbs out of sight, lifting moisture and smoke toward the opening. Inside the liner, where you actually live, air stays mild and still at bed height. If you drop the liner all the way to the ground, you block that hallway. The room can't exhale. Condensation builds. Throats wake grumpy. Height matters at the top too. A liner hung too low traps heat above your heads, but starves the draft. Too high, and the warm layer escapes before you enjoy it. Think of it like a hat brim inside the house. High enough not to brush your hair, low enough to catch the river of rising air and guide it upward. In deep cold, add a liner top, an interior collar stretched from the wall toward the center so it forms a gentle canopy above the beds. That canopy gathers the heat you already paid for and curves it back down the inner wall in a lazy loop. The result is a pocket of kindness, right where shoulders and knees live. At the smoke opening, the flaps are not hood ornaments. They are adjustable wings that steer the column. Tie them to poles you can reach from inside, then learn the two-finger rule. Adjustments are small. Open the upwind flap a touch to scoop and speed the draft. Ease the leeward flap so the column isn't ripped away. If a gust wants to shove smoke back inside, angle the upwind flap lower, close the leeward a bit, and watch how the column narrows to a polite pencil. Wind at your back, reverse it. Crosswind? Set both at a compromise, so the column rises clean before the breeze decides what to do with it. You don't have instruments, so you read the room with the only gauges that matter: eyes, nose, and skin. Eyes. Look at the smoke right above the fire. Thin and vertical is perfect. A wobbling flag means turbulence. A rolling bowl says you've made a ceiling for smoke to collect under. Nose. Slight wood, sweet scent is fine. Throat bite means you're hoarding stale air. Skin. At knee height, mild is correct. If your shins feel like they're in a river of cold, the door has been lazy or the liner gap is wrong. Fix the cause, not the symptoms. Don't just feed the fire to power through. Heat that roars is heat that leaves. Condensation is winter's slow prank. Every breath adds moisture. Wet mittens, snow tracked in, a pot left to boil without a lid. All of it tries to come back to you as frost on blankets at dawn. The cure isn't more heat, it's better routing. Keep a narrow strip of raised cover at the base, just enough that fresh air can enter the hallway and climb with that moisture. Pair it with a modest opening up top, so the flow continues. If a pretty rim of frost shows up around collars or bed edges in the morning, your room couldn't exhale where you sleep. Raise the liner an inch, open the flaps a finger, try again the next night. The house will tell you when you've got it. Dew cloths and drip truth. On nights when warm indoor air kisses sub-zero edges at the smoke opening, tiny droplets can form and fall. A light dew cloth, hung higher than the liner top thin hide or canvas, catches those and spreads them into nothing before they become a rude nose. Tap at 3 a.m. The old trick works so well that people forget it's there exactly the goal. What about stoves? If a small iron stove joins the household, the physics doesn't retire. The pipe must pass through the cover with a proper collar, rawhide, bark, metal ring, anything that stops heat from chewing your roof. Keep a modest gap under the liner and a disciplined vent up top. The stove's steady draw makes moisture control even easier. Don't overfire. The purr of a well-damped stove plus the quiet hallway of air is the simple definition of civilized winter. Fuel changes the draft's personality. Fast-burning cottonwood wants shorter pieces and frequent feeding. Your flaps should be set slightly more open to keep up with those quick exhale bursts. Dense hardwoods, where you have them, produce a slower, deeper column. Trim the opening to keep from overdrawing and stealing warmth. Dried chips on the plains create a remarkably even plume aim for a narrow slot above and an honest gap below, then stop fiddling. On damp coasts, small frequent fuel gives drying heat without steaming the room. Lesson: match flap angle to fuel tempo, not to superstition. Troubleshooting without drama. Smoke hugs the ceiling and eyes sting. You've made a lid. Open the top a little. Lower the upwind flap so the column tightens. Crack the base at one spot to feed the hallway. Check that the liner isn't glued to the floor. Draft too eager. Room goes desert. Dry. You're venting heat like a gossip. Ease the top down a finger. Close the upwind flap a touch. Shorten the fire's flame coals. Solve more problems than flames do. Cold band too high. Feet complain. Door discipline first. Weight it so it closes fast. Add a low snow lip at the threshold to block the floor river. If needed, raise bed platforms a hand. The lowest air is not where humans thrive. Random whiffs of smoke at gusts. You're in a rota. Shift the whole house half a length if that's possible. If not, re-aim the door away from the insult. then tie the flaps to a more defensive angle, upwind lower, leeward tighter. Brush snow weight so seams don't pull and create leaks. Seasonal tuning matters. In honest, deep cold, run the base gap reliably and the top with a narrow, steady opening. Moisture exits, heat lingers. As spring teases, open flaps wider by day for airing and sun, then return to the winter setting at dusk. On wet weeks, prioritize venting over raw warmth. Dry beats hot when the enemy is damp. In windstorms, quiet the room by tightening the top just enough to keep the column stable. Don't try to outshout weather with flame. Inside layout should serve the engine. Leave a clean ring around the fire so air can feed without tripping over tools. Keep drying racks at a sensible arc where smoke can pass and lend heat without making fabric crispy. Set water on a low shelf or the edge warm enough to stay liquid. Not so central that it boils into humidity you then have to evacuate. Teach the ladle to behave with a cloth wrap on the handle so nobody learns a metal lesson midnight. Myths to retire. Seal everything and you keep all the heat. No, you keep all the damp, all the smoke, and you move the cold band right into your bedroll. Big fire equals big comfort. Usually it equals wasted fuel, dry throats, and sparks auditioning for the roof. Openings are holes that leak heat. They are valves that set the engine speed. Close them and you stall. Tune them and you cruise. Training your senses takes a week, not a lifetime. At dusk, stand in the door and take a single breath. If it feels sharp at the back of the nose, open the top a finger. Hold a hand at floor height on the leeward side. If it feels like a cool stream pushing out, the door is lazy, add weight. Adjust the lip. Watch the crown of frost at the smoke opening at first light. Thin and even is the gold star. Thick or patchy means your draft was lurching overnight. Make one change per night, not 5. Let the room teach you. Finally, remember why this matters. The liner and flaps don't add warmth like an extra blanket. They reduce waste and move water out of your life. They make a small, honest flame feel like more than it is by insisting that heat linger where people live. They turn a shelter into a system. When you slide a hand from under the covers at 2 a.m. and the air at bed height is just kind, that's your hidden engine doing its quiet work. You won't brag about it in the morning. You'll just eat, pack, and move like a person who slept, which is the whole point. If the liner and flaps are the lungs, the bed is the bank. This is where you store heat so it stays with you instead of applying for a job in the rafters. A good winter bed is not a mountain of blankets. It is a calm sequence that makes still air do most of the work. Still air is the secret currency. Trap it, keep it dry, and you wake up feeling like the room owes you a thank you. Start at the bottom. The ground steals heat unless you give it another job, so put down spring and then flattening. Spring first. A deep layer of spruce boughs has bounce, scent, and thousands of air pockets that interrupt the ground's hunger. In willow or sage country, lay a thicker layer to make up for less spring. In reed country, woven mats are the workhorses. On top of spring, add a flatter mat to smooth the lumps, so hips stop writing complaints to ribs all night. That two-step is the quiet difference between camping and sleeping. Now hides. Hair up traps still air. Hair down sheds and makes a tougher shell. Most winters, the first hide lies hair up. Above it, another hide or blanket lays hair down if sparks worry you. Hair up if the night is dry and steady. 2 buffalo robes with fur facing each other make a warm pocket that laughs at the hour before dawn when cold tries to test your manners. Caribou lofts higher for its weight because each hair is a tiny hollow tube, like sleeping inside a field of microscopic cabins. Deer is the everyday friend that works anywhere. Rabbit skin blankets stitched from spiraled strips feel like a domesticated cloud. They are light, improbably warm, and famous for turning skeptics into fans by midnight. Frames help. A bed frame, a hand or two off the floor, keeps you above the coldest layer of air, gives your bedding room to breathe, and turns cleaning into a sweep and done instead of a wrestling match. Rawhide lacing across a simple rectangle adds spring and airflow. No frame? A thick reed mattress over boughs comes close. The test is what your wrist feels at knee height when you dangle it before sleep. If the air there is mild, the system is tuned. Bedding isn't just materials, it is orientation. Beds along the curve of the wall, under the liner's protection, live in the kindest air. Feet toward the fire is polite for boots and practical for faces. Leave a hand's width between bedding and the outer cover, so nothing wicks chill from the wall. At dusk, always shake and loft each layer. Crushed air is cold air. One quick shake turns a tired blanket into insulation again. That same habit makes animal hair last longer and resist matting. Clothing for sleep is strategy, not bravado. The goal is to keep blood moving and moisture moving out. Wear a soft cap or hood. Heads are chimneys. A loose scarf at the neck warms the biggest heat leak without turning your breath into condensation against your chest. Bed garments should be easy and forgiving. Tight anything is the enemy at 3 a.m. because it slows blood and teaches toes new vocabulary. If the day's leggings are damp, hang them where air and mild heat will persuade them, not where the flame will write holes in them. Boots go mouth down and a thoughtful distance from warmth. In hard cold, a fist of fine dry grass in each boot spreads pressure, traps still air, and collects what your skin lets go. In the morning, that grass leaves with the damp you did not want. Hands want options at night. Mittens are honest warmth, but fiddly for small tasks. Keep fingerless inners or thin liners at hand so you can stir coals or move a pot without stripping completely. The habit saves minutes and heat. A scarf, cap, and inner gloves sound like small talk until a gust finds your seam at dawn. Then they sound like scents. Hot stones are a sensible luxury when the land offers them. Warm stones at the fire edge, rolling cloth, slip near the feet at lights out. They give back heat with patience and fade by morning without drama. In country without suitable rock, forget this paragraph and sleep well anyway. A trick that depends on materials you don't have is not a trick. It is a story you don't need. Food and water are bed partners, not romance. A warm stew with fat before sleep asks your body to make heat for hours without fuss. A slice of dried meat in the small hours is a tool, not a treat. Water belongs on the edge of the fire, so it is water at dawn, not a sculpture you have to argue with. A stick across the pot prevents the kind of boil-over that turns coals into a sulk and storytelling into clean-up. Tea of spruce, willow, or mint clears a throat that had an opinion about smoke earlier, and it earns its space by making breath feel like a welcome guest in your own chest. If you wake to a pretty frost along your collar, don't blame the blankets first. That rim says moisture stayed with you because the room could not exhale where you sleep. Lift the liner a touch. Crack the base a finger. Narrow the top by the same finger so you don't dump heat. The goal is flow, not gale. If your eyes itch in the morning, you had more heat than sense. Ease the top down, trade flame for coals, and let the engine cruise instead of shout. A word on spark management. Wool traded from far away is a beautiful shield on top of fur because it takes the brunt of stray sparks. It also burns holes when you ask a flame to flirt. Keep wool where heat is present and fire is indirect. Teach the fire to behave. Short pieces, coals over speeches, no towering sticks auditioning for the smoke opening. Bedding that does not smell like a lesson is the mark of a good night. Night watch is not heroics. It is rhythm. Most households drift into a first sleep, a small waking when coals ask for attention, and a second sleep that feels like permission. The watcher does three things well and quietly. Adds a piece of fuel at the size of the job, moves the pot an inch so water stays shy of a boil, and checks the door. That door is always the hinge of everything. Weighted, pegged, trained to fall true without negotiation. A sloppy door invites a cold tongue to creep along the floor and climb into beds. A civilized door drops, taps the frame, and says goodnight like it means it. Dogs are honest bedfellows and better sensors than any instrument. The door guard sleeps where drafts form and complains before seams do. The seam inspector lies by the liner where it needs the most persuasion. The bed companion drifts to the person who needs another degree of warmth and pretends it was always going to lie there. Pay them in the morning and call it an ancient contract. Troubleshooting without excitement. Feet cold at 4 a.m. First, check dryness. Damp socks masquerade as bad blankets. Second, add grass to footwear or a wrapped stone near the bed foot. Third, raise the bed an inch or two, not the fire. Back cold when you roll? You've made a bridge. Your top layer is too stiff or too few. Add a soft layer above to follow your shape. Loft everything again. Condensation under you? Something is touching the outer wall or the floor is doing a job you forgot to assign. Pull bedding off the cover, thicken the spring layer, and give mats a turn in the sun when the day is honest. Waking thirsty? Your draft is aggressive or your fuel is bragging. Shift toward coals. Trim the top vent a finger, and keep the pot friendly so you can sip without waking the whole room. Social placement at night is as practical as hardware. Elders settle where drafts are least and pathfinding is easy. New parents get the quickest reach to fire, because small needs become big if you must climb over a household to answer them. Hunters who rise before dawn sleep where boots and door can meet without a parade. Guests are placed where they will wake to warm boots and a good opinion of your housekeeping. These are not niceties, they are the logistics of deep rest. When canvas replaces hide because trade made it simple, the bed rules don't change. Canvas is light and strong but thin to sparks and radiant loss, so the liner becomes the hero and the top wool shield earns its place. When a small iron stove arrives, resist the temptation to sleep bare. Stoves dry gear quickly, but their heat is local and directional. Keep bed layers honest. Keep heads covered. Keep the pot near, not central. The same bank and flow rule holds. Store heat in still air. Move moisture out in a steady, quiet stream. A last habit that looks like superstition and is not. Make the bed every night like you mean it. Shake, loft, align hairs the way water wants to run. Overlap edges so pockets stay pockets. Turn hides now and then so wear spreads. Brush fur with a calm hand to lift crushed nap. These gestures are free and pay back with hours of sleep you cannot buy any other way. In the morning, a good bed tells on itself. It lifts as you rise because trapped air wakes with you. It feels dry to the cheek. It holds its shape instead of collapsing into a tired heap. You set it back with the same care you use for the door, because both are promises. Do the small things, and the bed turns heat into a house guest who knows how to stay. That is the quiet wealth of winter. Not more flame, not more blanket, but better order, arranged where people actually live. A winter house has 1,000 parts, but 3 carry outsized power: the fire, the fuel that feeds it, and the door that decides whether all that work stays inside or walks out into the dark. You can have perfect beds and a clever liner, but if the flame is a show-off, the fuel is wrong for the weather, or the door is lazy, the room will spend the night teaching you preventable lessons. Start with the fire's job description. It is not a spectacle. It is a steady worker that makes coals on purpose. Coals are the savings account. Flames are the receipts. Build low, wide, and contained. A shallow ring of stones dry, crack-free, with flat faces toward the heat keeps the bed tidy and shaves turbulence off the column. Put your longest pieces parallel to each other like rails and feed crosswise in short, honest lengths. You're aiming for a glowing oval that purrs, not a torch that lectures the smoke hole. Fuel sets the tempo. In cottonwood country, wood brightens quickly and fades just as fast. Cut shorter sticks and feed often. Patience beats piling. Willow behaves if you split it fine and let it season properly. Underdone willow punishes grand plans with hissing drama. On the high plains, where trees are a rumour, dried chips from grazers are not a punchline. They're a system. Choose flat, dense pieces that don't crumble in the hand. Lay a small ramp of chips, so each catches from the one ahead, and your plume stabilizes into a slim, obedient thread. In birch forests, the papery bark is your gracious match in wet weather, but don't treat it like a lifestyle. Once the bed is hot, move to split heartwood to avoid a roof full of sparks. On wet coasts, think drying line, not bonfire. Many small feeds create more even warmth for gear and walls than single heroic logs that steam the room. Moisture is the quiet adversary you never fight directly. You root it. Lids live on pots. Wet mittens hang in the plume's shoulder, not over the core flame. Boots keep their distance close enough to warm, far enough to avoid the famous crescent of cooked leather. Keep water in the pot, and the pot barely below a boil. Water that stays water spares you the dawn chiseling competition. If you like an easy rule, let the pot click, not clap. That sound tells you the simmer is steady and you're not turning humidity into wallpaper. Now the door. Treat it like a valve, not a curtain. It hangs true on a simple frame, weighted so it falls fast and seals without petitions. The physics here is as simple as it is unforgiving. Cold air is heavy and sneaky. It slinks along the floor. A sloppy door is how it gets in, spreads like a cat, and climbs into beds. A civilized door gives one soft tap against its jamb and ends the debate. Make a low snow lip outside when drifts threaten just a hand-high ridge. That ridge cancels the floor-level torrent that otherwise undercuts your night. Door etiquette matters. People step through with a single, crisp lift, no lingering, no gossip with the weather, and let it fall. Coming in, brush shoulders and hat at the threshold so the room won't inherit your snow. If someone forgets, the reminder is a small joke and a demonstration, not a sermon. The room learns faster from tone than volume. Wind is a negotiator you meet with flaps and layout, but the door opens the talks. In a lee wind, set the flap angles so the column stands narrow and loyal, then confirm by standing at knee height near the door and feeling for movement. If your shins say stream, add weight and lower the edge into its groove. When gusts turn unruly, tighten the topper finger and shorten the flames. You'll keep draw without turning the house into a dehydrator. Storm practice is a handful of habits, done before drama arrives. Brush the cover from the leeward side with a long pole when wet snow stacks up. Don't wait for weight to write opinions into your seams. Angle stakes into frozen ground, not straight down. Angled stakes hold like they believe in your success and also come out without a fight. In deep snow, trench the perimeter and bury the skirt plugs, leaks and ties the house to the land. Inside, move the pot towards center a half hand, put one additional stick to work, and lower your voices. The room thinks better when everyone does. Troubleshooting without ego. Fire keeps surging, then sulking. Your pieces are too long or too green. Go shorter, split finer, and build around coals you can nurture. This stabilizes the plume and reduces spark auditions at the roof. Room feels hot and dry, but sleep is thin. You're venting too fast. Ease the topper finger, trade flame for coals, and put a lid on the pot. Crank heat is theatre, steady humidity plus modest warmth is rest. Floor chills ankles even with a good fire. Door discipline again, plus bed height. Add the snow lip outside, lift sleeping platforms a hand, and check that the liner gap at the base is open in one place, not everywhere. Soot kisses the dew cloth at odd hours. Crosswind turbulence. Nudge the upwind flap lower to cup the column, and tighten the leeward side so the stream rises clean before the wind grabs it. The drying rack is a quiet machine, and distance is its gear ratio. Hang mittens and shirts in the warm shoulder of the plume where smoke is thin, not in the flame's impatience. A rack one step too close teaches holes, one step too far teaches mildew. The correct arc is where fabric feels warm to the back of your hand, but you can linger there without flinching. Kitchen discipline protects sleep. Fat-forward stews carry heat deeper into the clock. Parched corn or a slice of dried meat lives near the bed, so the watcher's short wake doesn't become cooking. Tea earns its keep by clearing the throat the vents didn't. A ladle with a wrapped handle prevents midnight lessons in metallurgy. And always, always return the lid to shy boil. Steam that drifts is moisture that won't frost your collar later. Camp geometry matters as much as furniture. Set lodges in a crescent that faces a common wind-quiet pocket. The inner ring becomes a weather ally. Stake horses at a distance that breaks gusts without spooking the tents they protect. Keep a shared path to wood or chip pile. Night feet that know where they're going make fewer drafts at the door. A sweat shelter downwind turns steam into health, not humidity in the sleep house. Regional tweaks make the same principles look like cousins. In bark houses, the lid above the fire is your flap. Set its angle so smoke slips clean and the roof sheds drip to the edges. In mat lodges, layers hang like shingles. When frost stiffens them, they sing softly and seal better. Take the win and stop tinkering. In caribou skin tents under oil lamps, the flame is a purr. The door is a low tunnel that prevents a full house air swap each time someone checks the sky. Different skins, same sentence. Steady out, steady in. Keep people living at the kindest band of air. Maintenance is the unglamorous hero. Evening. Sweep the floor with willow so grit won't spark lids or feet at night. Rub lacing pins smooth so morning seams aren't a wrestling match. Oil the flap ties where they bite so adjustments stay two-finger, not two-hand. If canvas is your wall, edge stress points with rawhide or double stitching. It forgives rain and travel, but tells the truth about sparks. And inspect pegs after a freeze-thaw wood that looked loyal at dusk might be rehearsing an exit by dawn. The watcher's circuit at intermission is a choreography that earns hours of quiet later. Test air with a wrist at knee and shoulder height. Add a short stick to grow coals, not chatter. Nudge the pot. Listen to the roof. Lift the door once to read the weather's sentence. Let it fall with that civilized tap that means the house still remembers its job. Then back to bed. By morning, proof of success is boring on purpose. Frost makes a thin, even crown at the smoke opening moisture left the right way. The bed lifts because air is still trapped in it. Boots are dry without crisp. The pot thinks about boiling the second you ask, not the 10th. The door has nothing to say because it did everything it should. That's the point. Firecraft, fuel, and a well-run door turn winter from a contest into a routine. You stop performing survival and start practicing comfort. And comfort, night after night, is how you buy tomorrow's strength with today's attention. Bad weather doesn't knock. It tries the latch. It hunts for sloppy corners and lazy habits. That's why storm nights are less about muscle and more about tuning tiny, boring decisions that add up to a room that doesn't blink. If you've ever watched a sudden gust turn a confident fire into a confused rumor, you already know the wind thinks it's the main character. Your job is to give it bit parts. Start outside, while the sky is still promising to behave. Stakes go in at a slant, not straight down. Frozen ground holds angled wood like it means it. Lines are tied where poles want to carry load, not where your eye happens to land. In snow, trench the perimeter, bury the skirt, and cut a narrow doorway path so feet won't track a storm into the room one clump at a time. If wet snow stacks on the cover, brush from the leeward side with a long pole. You're not saving the house from collapse, that's rare, you're saving seams from learning bad grammar under weight. Inside, storm mode is quiet work. Flames shrink, coals deepen. Big fire is a bragger that forgets its lines the moment wind heckles. Coals don't care who's shouting. Move the pot half a hand towards center. Keep water hot but shy of a boil, so you aren't distilling the room into throat complaints. Hang wet gear in the warm shoulder of the plume, not above the flame. Gear should come out dry, not baptized. Flaps are your steering wheel. Picture the smoke column as a narrow road that runs up through the roof. Crosswinds try to push that road sideways. Your job is to cup it briefly, then let it go. Lower the upwind flap a touch so rising air is shielded just long enough to stand straight. Tighten the leeward side so the column slips free before the gust grabs it. Don't overshoot one finger of change at top, one finger at the base opening. Then reassess with your wrist at knee height. If your shins feel a steady drift, you've carved the right hallway. The door decides whether your good plan leaks out at ankle level. Give the threshold a small snow lip, a neat ridge that ends the favorite game cold air likes to play. A well-weighted flap should fall and seal in one clean motion. Storm etiquette is simple. Step out with one crisp lift, brush shoulders at the frame, step in, let the door fall. No weather interviews. Teach guests by example and jokes, not speeches. Rooms remember tone. Camp layout fights storms before they start. Lodges set in a shallow crescent face, a wind-quiet pocket. Horses staked at a respectful distance, slow gusts without threatening the tents they're protecting. A shared path to wood or chips. If you're a plains traditionalist, means nobody wanders a maze at midnight and drafts the house every 3 minutes. A sweat shelter downwind turns steam into health without loaning humidity to the sleeping room. When the wind escalates from opinion to policy, the camp's choreography shows. One person steps outside with the brush pole, sweeps the leeward cover, checks a stake, kicks the trench. Another inside nudges flaps to a new angle, shifts a stone, tucks a rack one step out of turbulence. Voices drop, not because anyone issued an order, but because a room under load thinks better when people do. The dog by the door becomes the barometer you trust. A sigh means gusts are smoothing. A raised head means the sentence outside just changed clause. Troubleshooting the noisy night. Smoke wants to swirl back at eye level. Your top is too open for the crosswind. Lower the upwind flap, narrow the leeward, and shrink flame to a coal-fed glow. Thin column, then angle. Floor draft keeps nibbling ankles. The door is the leak or your base gap is global, not local. Seal the flap fast, add that snow lip, and make the base opening only where the liner wants to feed its hidden hallway. Drip at dawn from the smoke hole. Turbulence condensed on the wrong plane. A dew cloth thin hide or cloth hung high catches strays. Tune flaps to a cleaner exit, and you'll stop teaching your nose geography. Gear still damp by morning. You hung it in the story the flame tells, not in the story the plume tells. Slide the rack outward to the warm shoulder. If the fabric stings the back of your hand, you're too close. If it feels only polite, that's the place. Storm food is architecture. Fat stays in the blood long enough to carry you through the small waking when coals need a nudge. Parched corn or a slice of dried meat lives near the bed, so the watcher doesn't turn "check the fire" into "reopen the kitchen." Tea earns its bedtime payroll by clearing the throat the wind forgot to respect. The ladle handle wears a wrap so nobody learns metallurgy in the dark. Different houses solve the same insult with cousins of the same move. Bark lodges lower a lid over the fire so smoke stands and then leaves. Mats in reed country stiffen like thin boards when frost arrives, a free upgrade from the weather itself. Caribou skin tents lean on lamp heat and low tunnels. Every entry is a polite reminder that air should behave before it meets the beds. Earth lodges shrug storms with a clay skin that refuses drama. Vents high, doors low, fires scaled to the room like commas in a sentence, not exclamation points. In canvas years and canvas happens because trade is convenient, the liner becomes the hero. Without it, you have a drum that plays drafts. With it, you have a wall that thinks. Edge stress points with rawhide. Teach sparks to mind their manners by keeping flames short and honest. If a small iron stove arrives, remember, it's a tidy worker, not a Sunday. It dries gear superbly and makes heat that is local and predictable. Fit a collar where the pipe meets the roof. Nobody enjoys the hot circle story even when told well. Keep the pot near the edge, not on the boil seat. Let the stove purr low. If the room feels like a kiln, you've mistaken dryness for comfort. Maintenance is the tax you pay to sleep cheaply later. Brush seam pins smooth, so they slide without chewing. Touch flap ties with a bit of fat where they bite. Inspect pegs after Thor wood that swore loyalty at dusk might practice escape by dawn. Sweep grit with willow. Little stones under bare feet in the night create vocabulary you'll have to explain to children in the morning. Social geometry also stormproofs a night. Elders sleep in the calmest eddies. Hunters who rise before light get the shortest path to boots and the door. New parents sit closest to the fire's switch so small needs stay small. Guests lie where the room will give them warm feet. This is generosity and also public relations. Dogs distribute themselves by instinct. The door guard for drafts, the seam inspector for the liner's weak idea, the bed companion for the person who argues with cold more than they admit. There's humor in bad weather if you let it in at the right volume. Someone will have cut steaks too short because afternoon sun made optimism. The night will edit that opinion. In the morning there will be a wink, a longer steak, and a camp that learned without a court case. Someone else will park mittens in the flame's autobiography instead of the plume's footnote. The lesson will be crisp at the edges. No scolding required. The house handles tone. Travel in storms is the final exam. Covers roll with lines and stakes inside so your fingers don't hunt a knot while the sky auditions chaos. Poles bundle to ride balanced. The lifting pole stays tied so the swing and seam sequence plays from muscle memory, not improvisation. Stop early. Half frame and half cover still deny wind the luxury of a clean run. Bury the skirt. Make a short wall. Build the smallest, steady fire you can control. Put boots in a predictable place. Count victories in boring units. Everyone ate, the flame behaved, the door fell true. By morning, success looks like paperwork. A thin frost crown at the smoke opening, dry bedding that lifts when you stand, boots supple, pot cooperative, path firm, horses unconcerned, dog stretching like a professional who enjoyed their shift. The room will seem smaller from outside than it felt inside. That optical trick is how you know the geometry was right. Storms don't respect speeches, they respect systems. When your fire, your liner, and your door keep their promises while the wind auditions every mood it knows, you've moved winter from crisis to craft. And craft, night after night, buys you the kind of sleep that makes tomorrow strong enough to look weather in the eye and smile without pretending. If the fire and the door set the scene, the bed decides the plot. Most winter mistakes happen 12 inches above the floor, where cold gathers, patience thins, and pride pretends that one more blanket is the same thing as a system. It is not. A good bed is a stack of decisions that trap still air, move moisture out, and let blood do its job without obstruction. Once you get this right, the night stops asking for heroics and starts paying you back with real sleep. Begin at ground truth. The earth is not the enemy, but it is a steady thief. Your first layer gives it a different job. Spruce boughs are the luxury version. Springy, aromatic, rib-friendly. Lay branches butt to tip, so stems point away from the sleeper. Where spruce is a rumour, willow, sage, or reeds do honest work. Think cushion first, flatten second. A mat of cattail above boughs evens out lumps and spreads weight so heat does not choose one rib to insult. If you have a frame, lash rawhide tight across a low rectangle. A frame a hand high gains you 2 prizes at once. It lifts you out of the coldest layer and gives moving air a place to mind its own business under the bed. Now the heat trap. Fur up is a promise to still air. Each hair is a tiny corral that holds a pocket you paid for earlier with supper. Fur down is a shell that sheds crumbs, ash, and the day's grit. Use both on purpose. First skin, hair up, to build your reservoir. Second skin, hair down, to guard the reservoir and resist sparks. Then your insulator stack. 2 buffalo robes laid fur to fur make a pocket that survives the hour before dawn, when the sky tries to convince everyone to change their mind about comfort. Caribou rides lighter and lofts higher for its weight. Deer is the dependable cousin that does good work, wherever bison is legend rather than livestock. Rabbit skin blankets stitched from spiraled strips feel like a friendly animal that never wakes to leave. They look delicate. They are not. They turn tiny fibers into an improbable warmth that makes late night feel like it forgot to be difficult. Trade changes the stack without changing the logic. A wool blanket on top of fur is a spark shield and a grease guard. It keeps hair honest and adds a dry, forgiving surface that resists the kind of humidity that writes frost poetry on collars at dawn. If canvas is your outer wall, the liner is the hero, and your bed rides in its lee. Tuck the head of your bed under the liner's warm canopy. Do not press the bed against the cover. Contact marks on the cover show up as dark rings of frost from breath that return the way it should not. A hand width of air behind you is not wasted space. It is the insulation you cannot sew. Pillows are not decorations. A low, firm roll keeps your neck where breathing stays clear. High pillows look indulgent and behave like a cork in the draft your lungs were counting on. If you share heat, give it geometry. Couples lie in a shape that hides edges from ambition. Children tuck into the lee of an adult where wakeful hands can fix small problems before they announce themselves. Clothing for bed follows the same math. Loose is a virtue. Tight binds slow blood. A soft cap or hood traps heat your neck and scalp work to make. A scarf that is easy at the throat lets breath do its chemistry without condensing on your chest and turning into a lesson. Sleep garments are not the ones that argued with weather. Those hang where air and mild heat can turn damp into memory. Footwear should be dry, loosely tied, and sometimes lined with a whisper of fine grass in deep cold. The grass spreads pressure, holds still air, and collects the small moisture the foot releases. In the morning you discard the grass and keep the toes. Trade accepted. Night physiology favors the humble. Heat that roars leaves early. Heat that whispers stays. Fat in the evening meal rides the long slope through midnight. Broth tells the body to relax without making the room hydrate itself into a cloud. If you wake in the intermission between first sleep and second, small food beats big plans. A slice of dried meat, a mouth of parched corn, 2 sips of tea made from spruce tips or willow. Enough to persuade the furnace, not enough to recruit the kitchen. Humidity is the sly opponent. You cannot see it until it writes ice where you did not invite it. Keep the pot at a shy boil so water stays water and steam does not rent the house. Hang wet gear in the warm shoulder of the plume, not directly above the flame. If fabric stings the back of your hand, it is too close. If it feels like patient sunlight, that is the spot. The liner's base gap is not a crack to be plugged. It is the mouth of a hallway where warm, used air climbs and leaves with its moisture, instead of giving it back to your bedding at dawn. The sign of success is boring. Dry nose, calm lungs, robes that lift with a little loft when you shake them. Etiquette is technology dressed as manners. Boots stand mouth down at the correct distance from heat. Mittens hang thumbs down so water runs where gravity meant it. The ladle handle wears a wrap, so a sleepy hand does not learn about hot metal by accident. The knife sleeps in the same corner every night, so bare feet do not become philosophers. The door gets the same respect every time. Lift, step, fall. No drafts perform in the aisle while you narrate the weather. Even a visitor learns by the second or third mistake because the house gives feedback at ankle height and nobody likes that feedback. Children learn the bed like they learn the fire, not through speeches, but by being allowed to help. A child can fluff boughs and feel the difference under their own hand. A child can shake a robe to raise the crushed air and see the surface relax like a creature that remembered its job. They can be handed the duty of checking for floor drafts with a wrist and reporting honestly. Their reward is immediate. They sleep hard and wake cheerful. That is how you know science has become habit. Dogs are not furniture. They are thermal devices with opinions. The door guard is a draft meter. The seam inspector sleeps where the liner was pretending not to need a second thought. The bed companion finds the person who will benefit most from 1 degree more and arranges itself without paperwork. Pay them in breakfast and in the right to pick locations. They have been watching houses longer than any of us. Morning is the grade. If the smoke opening wears a thin, even crown of frost, your liner and flaps taught air to leave politely. If boots are supple and not crisp, your rack was the right distance. If the pot cooperates at the first nudge, you did not let it become sculpture. If the bed lifts and exhales trapped air instead of lying flat and sullen, you layered correctly. If you stepped onto a swept floor and did not invent new language with your feet, you maintained the room. These are quiet scores. They add up to a day that starts ready instead of starting with apologies. Regional beds keep the same grammar and switch accents. In bark houses, platforms lift sleepers out of the floor's low tide. Mats and hides create layers that resist damp and carry warmth by patience, not theatrics. In mat lodges, reeds stiffen in frost and become thin boards that support sleep better than they look. In caribou skin tents near oil lamps, bedding of caribou hair sits on a raised deck, so the cold layer flows under it. The lamp's broad, even heat pairs with fur that traps air inside each hair. The result is a room that sits at calm on a scale that does not impress thermometers and deeply impresses hands and faces. In canvas years, the same truths hold with minor edits. Edge the canvas where stress lives. Double-stitch the corners that carry the lift. Hang the liner with a hand space at the floor and a measured height at the top. If you sleep against raw canvas without a liner, you have elected to learn about inside weather the hard way. Add a dew cloth above in drip-prone climates. It is a thin insurance policy against the one drop that always knees your nose just before dawn. If you need one final rule for beds, borrow the door rule and shrink it. Fast is kind. Shake, smooth, tuck, check drafts, place tools where hands will seek them without thought. A bed made with attention is a bed that gives that attention back while you are unconscious. A sloppy bed turns sleep into a negotiation in the hour before light. Why negotiate when you could rest? Put it together and the math is simple. Cushion below that does not sink. Insulation that traps still air. Shell that resists sparks and grease. Looseness at the body so blood flows. Humidity routed out instead of stored. Door that seals. Fire that speaks in coals. None of this is dramatic. All of it is decisive. When the room learns to hold kindness at knee height, and the bed learns to hold stillness at skin distance, winter stops being a personality and returns to being weather. You stop acting brave. You start sleeping well. And sleeping well is the entire point of learning how warmth actually works. Good winter sleep is earned in daylight. You can think of the night as a test, and the day as open book prep. Every chore you handle before the light slips off the snow is a sentence you do not have to write at 3 a.m. The choreography looks simple from a distance. Up close, it is a dozen small habits that remove surprises and build a room that behaves. Start with the ground, because the ground starts with you. Read the slope like water would. Cold flows downhill and pools in hollows. Wind rides ridges and snaps at exposed benches. The sweet spot is a shoulder above a creek's chill, below the skyline's opinion. Kick the snow and listen. A sharp squeak means dry and fierce. A dull thud means damp and forgiving. Either is fine if you place the door and flaps for the day's wind, not yesterday's memory. Willows that lean one way tell you about the usual push. Cottonwoods with a slight bend mark, a notch where gusts break. A row of dark stones that lose frost first will hold a little warmth at dusk. That is not poetry. That is a softer first hour of evening. Pitch is a conversation, not a performance. Tripod first, ring second, seam last. Poles lean as a chorus, no soloists. Stakes go in at an angle so frozen ground hugs them. On snow, Trench the skirt and bury the lower edge, so drafts have to find somewhere else to practice. If a storm is thinking about it, cut a low snow wall windward. It does not need to be tall. It needs to be honest. Inside, hang the liner with a hand of air at the floor and a measured height at the top. That little hallway is your smoke's quiet stairwell. A dew cloth or a light inner collar above the beds turns stray drops into nothing instead of drama. The daily loop begins the moment the house can think for itself. Air out bedding early while sun has opinions. Shake hides to wake the loft, and send last night's breath out the door where it belongs. Hangs mats where a polite current visits, not where a gust will write its name across your work. Boots mouth down, sleeves open, nothing touching the wall so gear does not become a science experiment by morning. Fuel is not collected by bravado. It is chosen by temperament. In timber, split straight-grained pieces that do not throw sparks at your roof. In wet country, stage wood by age. A near-fire ring for today's dry, a mid-ring for tomorrow's almost, and a far stack under cover that will not collect a private climate. On plains, pick chips that are flat, dense, and not crumbling. The quiet heat they give will make a better night than any speech about fires that roar and leave. Water sits on the edge of the fire all day. Keep it hot enough to be water, not hot enough to steam the room. A stick across the pot prevents sudden enthusiasm that douses coals and reputation at once. If the pot lives on the edge, your midnight self will thank your morning self for keeping metal cooperative. Tools travel to known places. Fire tongs handles out, not underfoot. Knife in the same corner every night. Sewing kit in a pouch, not loose where a needle decides to meet a bare heel. Broom of willow visible because a swept floor saves language. No one becomes a poet by stepping on grit in the dark. Midday is for repairs and for prevention disguised as fidgeting. Rub lacing pins smooth so they slide without chewing the cover. Touch flap ties with the smallest smear of fat where they bite. If a seam looks proud, set a neat cross-stitch now, not when wind is judging. Pegs that went in on yesterday's thaw might lie today. Tug, adjust, walk away. If you own a small iron stove, check its collar where it kisses the roof. A tidy worker still needs manners. Camp layout gets tuned while people are in a good mood. Doors should face the same way so paths agree. Pile fuel in common and keep it high enough that drift and dog do not sign it. Horses or sled dogs at a distance that breaks wind without inviting wake-up calls. If a sweat shelter is part of the plan, put it where steam leaves downwind and health returns upwind. Afternoons are how you buy a good 2 a.m. Light food for the middle watch lives within reach. A slice of dried meat, a mouth of parched corn, a small cup you can fill without rehearsing cookery. Ladle handle wears a wrap so sleepy hands learn nothing new. Mittens hang thumbs down where the plume's shoulder lives. If fabric complains against the back of your hand, you move too close. If it feels like patient sun, that is the place. Children get jobs with results they can feel. Let them fluff boughs and learn spring with their fingers. Let them shake a robe and watch the surface rise like a creature that remembers. Ask them to find floor drafts with a wrist and report. They will sleep deep because they put their name on the system. Dogs are partners, not props. The door guard will move when the threshold begins to talk. The seam inspector will claim the one place the liner needs help. The bed companion will choose the person who is arguing with cold more than they admit. Pay in breakfast and in respect. They are better at this than most of us. The hour before dusk is where competence pays interest. Bedding is lifted, smoothed, and reset, so crushed air becomes spring again. The pot is moved a thumb towards center. Coals are groomed with a patient hand. Flaps adjust a finger at the top, a finger at the base. The door frame gets a quick look and a quicker fix. A small snow lip appears outside the threshold, so the floor layer stops practicing mischief. Stories in the evening are sized to fuel. The room has work, not a stage show. The day's small lessons are passed around without capes or drums. A stake that needed one more inch. A horse that taught a younger one how to stand. A mitten that learned about plume versus flame. Everyone laughs without scolding. Tone matters. Houses copy tone. When the first sleep falls, the room is already running on rails. The night watch is a wandering duty, not a hero's shift. Wake, test air with the wrist at knee height. Add one piece of fuel, nudge the pot, look out the door long enough to learn whether weather found a new sentence. Let the door fall true, lie down. Second sleep arrives because the system is boring in the best way. Travel days fit themselves into this loop, like verses in a known song. Breakdown starts with the order that avoids hunting. Poles roll into a bundle that rides true. Lines coil into loose loops that release without knots that insult cold fingers. The cover folds along its trained seams, so next pitch will be more memory than invention. The firebed is drowned and raked, so the place does not remember your name longer than it must. Moving in rhythm prevents the kind of mourning that starts with apologies. Different biomes add accent, not contradiction. In bark houses, platforms and vents carry the same logic, just inside heavy walls with slow thoughts. In mat lodges, frost turns reeds into thin boards that hold shape and quiet. On the coast, the day's loop leans toward drying more than heating. Lines under beams become a forest of gear that smokes politely to dry, not to perfume. Far north, lamps are trimmed like clocks. Wicks are taught to behave. Beds sit on raised decks, so the cold river flows under, not through. The same script. New costumes. Health is not a mystery. Vent enough that breath does not return as lace on collars. Heat enough that blood does its job. Eat honest fat and broth that ride past midnight. Drink water that never had the chance to become sculpture. Sleep garments loose. Day garments hung. Hands protected. Feet respected. None of it needs capital letters. All of it makes morning straightforward. If you want a pocket checklist for the loop, it fits in one hand. Place high, not low. Pitch tight, not loud. Liner gapped, not plugged. Fire small, not proud. Pot near edge, not center. Gear in plume shoulder, not above flame. Boots mouth down, mittens thumbs down, ladle wrapped, knife parked, broom visible, door fast, flaps tuned. Bed layered, cushion, trap, shell, snacks ready. Water hot, humor handy. When this loop becomes the way your hands move without asking your brain first, nights stop being feats and start being furniture. The room keeps its promise at the level where people live. The fire says little and does much. The air goes where it is told and takes damp with it. In the morning, light behaves like water again instead of metal. You sit up, stir coals, set the pot, and step into a day that already likes you. That is the quiet wealth people were talking about when they said, winter is not an enemy. It is a season with rules. Learn the daily loop, and the rules feel like good manners rather than limits. You sleep well, and sleeping well is what gives tomorrow its strength. A calm night makes you feel skillful. A stormy one tells the truth. When wind stands up and decides to talk all at once, the house answers with everything you taught it in daylight. The playbook is short. Short is what you can remember with cold fingers. First, make weight behave. Wet snow is a polite guest for 5 minutes and a bully after 10. Brush from the leeward side with a long pole so you do not push load into seams that did not volunteer. Aim for rhythm. Step out, sweep, step in, seal the door. You do not narrate the weather. You keep the opening fast so the room does not collapse toward it. A quick lip of packed snow along the skirt turns sneaky drafts into someone else's problem. If the lower edge hums or slaps, bury it in a neat trench. The house will quiet like a drum with the skin tuned. Second, tune the engine. The smoke flaps are not decoration, they are the throttle. If the room feels thirsty and eyes complain, open a finger at the top and close a finger at the base so the draft steepens. If heat is running away, ease the top down and feed the base a touch more. You are shaping a river that happens to be invisible. The test is not a theory. It is the way your lungs relax at knee height and the way frost crowns the smoke opening in a thin, even ring instead of thick spikes on the liner. Fuel gets smaller as weather gets louder. Short pieces burn controllably. Chips on the planes give an even line that does not climb into mischief. Cottonwood is fine if you cut it shy and feed it often. A bonfire is a tantrum that wastes your work. A steady bed of coals is a partner. If sparks announce themselves, you answer with a mat over fur or a small shield of bark. Not forever, just until the stove mind returns to the flame. Third, stack your fixes. Field repairs follow a kind order so you do not make one problem into two. Seam glow or ember kiss at the roof. Damp cloth on a stick. Press. Hold until the glow fades all the way. Do not crush. Do not rub hard enough to thin fibers. If canvas learned a rude word from a spark, patch small and honest at once. Cross stitches that lie flat. No lumps. If a flapline chews at its own knot, touch it with a whisper of fat so it slides without eating itself. Stakes are the truth tellers you can hear with your feet. In frozen ground, angle is everything. Lean them away from the pull and give them depth. If one begins to feel talkative, set a partner beside it and join them with a short lashing so they share the load like sensible cousins. In snow, cut a slot, slide a toggle or deadman stake sideways, bury, stomp, wait a moment, then set the line. Pull too soon, and you are teaching snow how to be unreliable. Give it a breath, and it will harden into cooperation. Inside the room, reduce theatre. Lower voices make better decisions. The watch is not a shift so much as a baton. You wake because the house tapped you. You add a piece of fuel along the edge, not across the face. You nudge the pot so water stays honest. You count 3 breaths at the door. Decide what the weather has done with those breaths, and let the cover fall clean. You lie down without reporting, and your moving invites someone else to settle their robe. A good storm room behaves like a crew that has rehearsed. Sometimes the weather wins the afternoon and tries to take the night. Then you shrink the problem. Half frame, half cover, full intelligence. A lean windbreak strung with a robe turns a bare fire into a pocket of calm. Snow packed along the ground edge of a short wall makes drafts lose interest. Beds move closer, and feet point toward heat. Boots are wrapped in spare cloth so morning does not open with a frozen joke. You count successes in plain units. Everyone ate. Everyone slept some. The fire remained a friend. The house did not ask for heroics. It could not return. Emergencies carry their own manners. If a line parts in a blow, you do not shout. You put weight on the flapping edge, with a body or a bundle, while another hand finds the new tie. If a pole complains, you move the load around the circle before you retire the one with the opinion. Poles are a community on purpose. None carries everything. If water begins to condense and return where you do not want it, call a recess and retune the breath. Raise the base gap a finger, ease the top a finger, shift the pot a thumb. 10 small motions beat one grand fix that breaks something else. Dogs help in ways people do not plan. The door guard warns before a seam speaks. The seam inspector picks the place where lift wanted to start. The bed companion moves to the person who stopped sleeping well and changes the math by 1 warm degree. Pay in warmth and food, and the right to pick a station. They are storm hardware with fur. Teaching the next hands is part of the storm playbook because the lesson sticks best when the wind is grading it. Give a child the long pole and the rule about sweeping from leeward. Let them feel how the cover wakes and relaxes under the brush. Put their wrist at floor height near the door and have them tell you whether the room is honest in that layer. Let them decide if mittens are too near the flame by the back of the hand test. Show them the rope coil that releases without knots. Then make them coil it. Knowledge that lives in hands does not wander off when memory is busy. Camp layout can take a punch if it was placed like a sentence with the wind in mind. Doors are lined so paths do not disagree. A short snow wall windward of the circle lowers the argument for everyone. Horses set just far enough to be a windbreak without becoming a midnight conversation. Lines under the high beams carry clothing to dry by draft, not by drama. A rack at the right arc from the fire turns steam into a plan rather than a fog. Regional storms are different, but the answers rhyme. In barkhouses, the lid over the smoke opening learns its angles in the first 3 weeks of winter and forgets nothing. In mat lodges, reeds stiffen into thin shields that sing when gusts inspect them and then go quiet again. On the coast, the roof sheds rain because beams were placed with a memory for water's habits. Far north, a lamp trimmed clean makes a climate that is half light and half heat, steady as a heartbeat, indifferent to wind that only exists outside. Health inside the storm is managed by the same small dials. If the air dries your throat, ease the draft without smothering the room. If the air wets your collar, steepen the draft so moisture stops thinking it owns the place. Sleep will divide itself on these nights, which is not failure. First sleep carries you. A gentle waking attends coals and flaps. Second sleep goes down deeper because the system is honest again. People who chase one long sleep like a trophy tend to lose both. People who accept the night's intermission as normal wake ready. Food is part of the repair kit. Stew with fat and grain is architecture you swallow. It rides the hours when wind thinks it is clever. Tea of spruce or willow or mint lifts the lungs without hiring a brass band. Water that never left the warm edge saves you from negotiating with ice at a bad hour. Snacks within reach keep the watch a courtesy rather than a production. By morning, a good storm room looks unexcited. The ring of frost at the opening is thin and even. Boots are soft where a sensible person put them. Bedding lifts because you shook it before dusk, and because the room breathed all night instead of hoarding damp. Stakes come out clean. Lines coil without knots fighting you for fun. The place bears no scar that will scold the next traveller. If you want one sentence that covers the storm playbook, it fits in the same pocket as yesterday's checklist. Make weight slide. Make air think. Make fire small. Make doors fast. Make fixes early. Make knowledge live in hands. The rest is tone. A house that keeps tone when the wind forgets its manners is a house that buys you sleep in weather that once would have written your story for you. You write it now, quietly, correctly, warm. If you've stayed with me this far, you already know the punchline. Winter sleep isn't a stunt. It's a stack of small, boring wins that add up to a room that behaves. What looks like magic at 3 a.m. is daylight discipline salted across a dozen details. No heroics required. Just gravity, breath, and habits that respect both. Let's land the plane by turning the whole journey into a handful of rules you can remember when your brain is wearing mittens. Rule 1. Place beats power. Pick ground like water picks paths. Cold rolls downhill and pools. Wind rides ridges and hunts corners. So you camp on a shoulder above the creek, not in its pocket. You aim the door for morning sun, or for the lee, whichever today demands. A few shrubs become a windbreak if they're honest. The wrong trees become widowmakers. The place decides 60% of the night before the first pole stands. Rule 2. The wall must think. A liner isn't decor, it's a second brain. Leave a hand of air at the floor, a calm canopy at the top, and suddenly your house has lungs. That hidden hallway between liner and cover turns moisture into motion and motion into comfort. Add a dew cloth or interior collar in drip-prone weather, and stray droplets become manners instead of insults. Rule 3. Doors end most arguments. A sloppy flap makes a river of cold at ankle height. A trained door taps the frame and ends the scene. Weight it, peg it. Give the threshold a neat snow lip when storms practice mischief. Teach everyone the 3-beat. Lift, step, fall. No interviews with the weather on the way out. No speeches on the way in. Rule 4. Fire is a worker, not a lead singer. Short pieces, wide bed. Coals over drama. Flames tell stories. Coals keep promises. Tune the smoke flaps like valves, one finger at a time. Lower the upwind flap to cup the column. Tighten the leeward to aim it. If your nose complains, your engine's off. Fix flow, not just flame. Rule 5. Moisture is the real opponent. Dry beats hot, always. Gear hangs in the warm shoulder of the plume, not above the flame. Pots click, not clap. Water lives on the edge, so it stays water. If your collar frosts at dawn, you didn't vent, you marinated. Raise the base gap a finger, close the top a finger, and try again tomorrow. The crown of frost around the smoke opening should be thin, and even that's your gold star. Rule 6. Beds are banks, not monuments. Cushion, then flatten, then trap, then shell. Boughs or mats for spring. A smoothing layer for ribs. Fur up to hold still air. Fur down to shed and shield. Wool on top if sparks are showy. Frames a hand high lift you out of the coldest layer. Shake and loft at dusk. A bed that lifts when you stand is a bed that paid dividends all night. Rule 7. Food and clothing are architecture. Fat and broth ride past midnight. Small snacks keep the intermission civilized. Sleep garments loose, heads covered, boots dry and mouth down. A whisper of fine grass in hard cold turns footwear into allies. Fingerless liners let the watcher adjust coals without undressing ambition. Rule 8. Dogs are infrastructure with a heartbeat. Door guard, seam inspector, bed companion. They do the sensing we pretend to outsource to instruments. And they do it while generating heat, morale, and alarms you can trust. Pay them in breakfast and veto power over where they sleep. Rule 9. Maintenance is the opposite of drama. Smooth the pins. Oil the bite points on ties. Sweep the floor because feet are honest critics. Angle stakes, trench skirts, brush snow leeward. A small fix now saves a parable later. Houses reward this attitude with silence. Rule 10. Tone sets the room. Storm nights are quiet not because people are scared, but because quiet minds tune better. The watcher adds one stick along the edge, not across the face. Nudges the pot, listens to the roof, reads 3 breaths at the door, lets it fall, returns without a report. The house relaxes when people do. Maybe you're living in nylon and aluminum, not hide and pole. The grammar still holds. A double wall tent is just liner logic in factory cloth. That gap between inner and fly? It's the same hidden hallway, so keep it clear. Vent high and feed low. Don't cork the vents to save heat, unless you like waking in a sweatshirt made of frost. Dry your gear in the shoulder of the vent stream, not pressed to the roof. Use shorter fuel, lower flames, and a wide bed of coals when you can. Put water where it thinks it belongs. And run your zipper like a door. Quick in, quick out. No monologues. Cabins and vans obey the same rules with different suits. A wood stove is a tidy worker, not a star. Dampers are smoke flaps in metal. A collar where pipe meets roof is the difference between heat and a lesson. Insulation below your bed matters more than blankets above it. Crack a vent, run a small steady flame, and let moisture leave on purpose. Keep boots off the floor. Keep tools where sleepy hands find them without inventing poetry. Even in apartments and houses, winter comfort is the same physics wearing carpet. Draft-proof the door with a threshold lip. Run a small fan to pull warm air down from the ceiling. Sleep with a light cap. Keep a glass of water where you won't negotiate with thirst at 2 a.m. Air bedding in sun. Teach radiators to purr, not shout. And never confuse a room that's quiet with a room that's sealed. You don't want sealed. You want steady. If there's a theme here, it's that old solutions weren't quaint, they were correct. People measured success, not by bravado, but by the absence of trouble. No ice on collars, no tears in boots, no smoke tantrums, no brittle throats. They turned weather into a known variable. The art was in the sequence, not in the spectacle. That's worth saying out loud, because modern stories love spectacle. Extreme cold survival makes better thumbnails than respect your door and keep your pot at shy boil. But in practice, the quiet habit wins. A house that breathes right makes you forget you're doing physics. A bed that's layered right makes you forget winter had an argument prepared. You wake without a speech in your head. You make breakfast because you can, not because you survived something. Pass it on the way it was handed down, by letting people do it. Put a kid's wrist at floor height and ask what the air says. Give them the long pole and show leeward brushing. Let them coil a line that won't knot when it matters. Teach them the 3 beat at the door. Tell the joke about mittens in the flame and then point to the plume shoulder. Show, don't sermonize. Knowledge that lives in hands outlives the weather and the fashions. And if you need one sentence to carry out into your next season, take this. Be correct in small things. Place high, not low. Pitch tight, not loud. Liner gapped, not plugged. Fire small, not proud. Pot near edge, not center. Gear in plume shoulder, not in the flame. Boots mouth down, mittens thumbs down. Knife parked, broom visible, door fast. Flaps tuned, bed, cushion, trap, shell. Snacks ready, water hot, humor handy. Do that, and winter stops being a villain and returns to its rightful job. Scenery. The night becomes an instrument you know how to play low notes from coals, breath moving in time with the liner's hidden hallway, a door that clicks like a metronome, a bed that holds the still air you saved up all day. You lie down, roll once, and feel the temperature hold like a promise. Outside, stars saw themselves into the roof of the world. Inside, the air is kind, where knees and hands live. You sleep because the system is honest, because attention outruns bravado, because comfort is a craft and you practiced it. In the morning you wake without ice in your throat or complaints in your joints, and that's the only metric that ever mattered.